Hey there. It's raining this morning. It's a good thing because it's not likely I'm going to run into anyone out here today. And what I've been thinking about lately is civilization could be a word for it. We call ourselves civilized, but then we don't necessarily act civil all the time, so perhaps culture is a better word. But I recently pulled out an old book that I have. It's National Geographic from 1935, now 53. And a lot of very good illustrations, perhaps a little bit mannered, that show lifestyles, culture, activities, buildings, rites of various civilizations of history going way back. And you look at each of these. Take, for example, the Spartans. This is before the Greeks, and the Spartans, read about them, and they began militarizing their children, boys, at age 7. So they were taught to fight, use weapons, and weren't allowed to marry until age 30. And in Spartan culture, if a baby was born and there seemed to be anything wrong with it at all, they threw it off a cliff. So, and then, it actually doesn't mention this in the book, but the reason why, you might assume, well, they did this to protect themselves from invaders. It's like, no. They did it because to quell slave uprisings. So they had slaves, and they'd had an uprising of slaves. So basically, the culture's built on something that's bad, and then the response is bad, bad upon bad. So anyway, they're one culture, Greeks came along. The Greeks were perhaps a little more intelligent about a lot of things than a lot of cultures were. We still refer to the Greeks, and the Romans came along, and there's not much question about the cruelty of the Roman Empire, domination of everyone and everything. But they had this, great concrete that they made. That's wonderful. So that's a good thing, the concrete. Also talks about the Egyptians, and the Egyptians were around for a long, long time, and they put a heck of a lot of effort into building structures. They didn't start off being pyramids, but eventually they created these gigantic pyramids, which are a bit mind-boggling. And we can look at those and say, well, we could do that, but we don't need to, we don't want to, whatever reason. And whether or not the pyramids have some sort of, woo-woo power, pyramid power, as it's been called, well, don't know about that. It's possible, but that might have been a reason for their construction that we tend to overlook, right? And so anyway, you look at all these cultures, and it's like, to the citizens, people living in them, basically they knew nothing else, and they probably thought they, kind of like what we think, in an arrogant way, that we're advanced, this is civilization. Everything else is kind of, lacking, is primitive, And what I would say is that it doesn't matter what the culture, what the civilization is. You could be building pyramids or nuclear reactors. You could be, turning 7-year-olds into soldiers, or turning 70-year-olds into putting them in the sex trade, So with history, you know, as it's been said in the past, an analogy, you know, is that hemlines go up and down. It's like, so you can see charts of hemlines going up and down throughout the decades. Of course, we don't even have hemlines anymore. Not really. Not too many women wearing dresses these days, but anyway, that's not the point. The point is that with civilizations, the trappings can change. You know, it could be tremendous accomplishments like the pyramids, you know, which when you think about the sheer amount of time and energy that they put into building those, that could have possibly gone into something else, kind of wonder. And here we are, you know, we can put people on the moon and everything's electrified, electrification of the entire world. We think we're sitting in the driver's seat, you know, but it's like, couldn't be any better, you know. All these other civilizations that came before are inferior. And basically what I would say is, you know, this civilization will come to an end. Not that I can necessarily predict the future, but you know, a lot of people are kind of realize this on a subconscious level. It's like, that's why we need to go into space, so that, you know, the human race won't ever croak, so we can keep things going, you know. It's like, really? So you're going to go to other planets so you can install a two-party system, something like that, take the problems that we already have that we haven't overcome, and, you know, export them out there to other worlds. So anyway, with our idea that somehow that we're the pinnacle, I just think is wrong. We're not really any different. Human nature hasn't changed. The hemlines go up and down, the technology changes, the artifacts change, the societal mores, the cultural, you know, rituals, those things change, but essentially human beings remain the same, more or less, right? Anyway, that's basically the argument right there. I guess I could leave it right there. That before we get too arrogant, too full of ourselves, imagining with imagined superiority, that you know, we're basically just another stamp in the stamp album, as far as it's concerned with these other civilizations that have come and gone. You know, and we look at them and somehow we just don't really get it. It's like, that's not them, that's us. We're no different from them. You know, another thing to contemplate is the Roman Empire, and periods where they had one crappy, you know, emperor after another, you know, 5 or 6 in a row. And of course we got a pretty crappy emperor right now, and perhaps he's a reincarnation of one of those guys, but if so, certainly didn't learn any lessons from that lifetime. So perhaps the real question is, does human nature really change? You know, we come and go over the centuries and thousands of years pass, and the hemlines go up and down, styles change, all these things change on the surface, but then on a deeper level they don't seem to change. So human beings as an experiment in free will, as I've mentioned before, where are we exactly on the ladder, on a sort of evolutionary hierarchy of development? It's like, well, maybe what we're on is the 3rd grade. And you know, if you turn on the news or something, it's like, well, that's kind of could bear that out. You know, it's like, yeah, it's kind of like the 3rd grade. I haven't graduated yet, and haven't moved up to higher levels of understanding. And you know, the idea of grade levels it's been applied to religion. And I think a college professor began this idea, and he didn't mean it in a derogatory way, but a lot of religious people took it that way. And he basically classified religion and spirituality, I think, into 4 grades, 4 levels. The first level, first grade, was basically like a child, who gets told God's upstairs and say your prayers. And it doesn't go any deeper than that. Second grade, I can't remember all these verbatim, but is a little advanced beyond that. Third grade is faith, basing your beliefs on faith, not on experience. 4 could be a higher level where there is experience involved. But anyway, third grade, what happened when he was teaching about these levels is that he said he had students come into the class wearing badges, buttons that said third grade and proud of it. Actually, it was levels, I think, level 3 and proud of it, So they got a little insulted and didn't like being referred to as being at a certain level. But he had said clearly that it's not a matter of one level being better than another or something like that. It's just like growing from a baby to an old person. It's just a natural progression. So it's like you don't have to stay there forever. Of course, some people do stay there through their whole lives, and that's the whole point for them. You can't let go of it. So we see an awful lot of, the can't let go thing these days. I was talking about, the monkey with the hand in the peanut jar, can't pull the hand out, can't let go of the peanuts. And see a lot of similar things with ideologies. And my God, the debates we have going on now, the DNC and the RNC, each side sort of demonizes the other side, and very inflexible and rigid when it comes to holding their own ideologies, won't let go of anything, won't consider anything else. And of course it gets ridiculous. So what happens when someone is so hardcore right wing, left wing, something like that? Well, they essentially become mentally rigid, and it's not a good thing for anyone. But what happens psychologically is that it's good for not good, but it serves a function to the identity of the person. So with 2 parties, say for example, right, left, red, blue, you say, well, I don't really know who I am, but I know I'm not them. So it's like defined in opposition. So you don't know who you are, but you know you're not them, so therefore that's who you are, not them. Where I think, truth be told, about political ideologies is that, that's a nice web, is that each one has certain advantages, It's like there are people on each side of the aisle who have certain skills that are useful in some situations, Conservatives might be better at business decisions, liberals might be better when it comes to social programs. So you need both, Just like these debates we're having now, or not debates, but the RNC last night was saying all this stuff about, what a great job Trump's doing, blah, 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 and all this stuff, and all these great things he's done for people. And it's like, wait a sec. These are liberal ideals that you're saying he's done, and then you're saying the liberals are bad. So anyway, to sum it up, it's the fucking third grade. Yep, that's where we are. So anyway, to close this down as quickly as possible, basically, let's not get too full of ourselves about where we are, that we're so much better than ancient cultures and other countries and things like that. Because truth be told, we're just in the middle of it. We're surrounded by it. We were born into it. We've never known anything else. So if you want to know something else, if you want to have a different experience, you're free to create it for yourself. A lot of people have done this. Stanislaw Lem was the kind of thinker that did that. Buckminster Fuller, thinking outside the box, coming up with all kinds of things differently. And of course, you have to work with what you have, right? So some would say, oh, well, there are no original ideas in the world. Everything's learned from someone, taken from somewhere. But I thought this the other day. I saw an interview with Jeff Beck, the guitarist, He's being very modest. And he's saying, well, my style, it comes a little bit from Jimi Hendrix, and a little bit from Ravi Shankar, a little bit from here and there. Put it all together. It's like, really? Well, where did they get their styles? Did they pick, cherry pick here and there and put it together? And if so, if they took from people, where did those people get it from? How far back do you go? And it's like, well, the key to truly original thinking is to take one system that's unrelated and pass it over like a template onto the system that you're working with. So say, for example, I want to draw a picture, and I want it to be unlike anything I've done before. I don't necessarily want it to resemble another artist. Say perhaps even the medium itself, I want it to be different. And I want it to be unlike anything that's come before. So what do? Well, visual art is based on, usually 2 dimensions. Could be 3 dimensions, color, value, light, things like that. So what you do is you take another system that's unrelated, sort of unrelated. Could be mathematics, say, or the alphabet, or science, something like that. So take the alphabet, for example. Right? So you want to create a picture. You have the alphabet, you throw a dart, blindfolded, boom, you hit a letter, Q. Okay, well, how do you turn Q, the letter Q, into a piece of art? Well, you look at it different ways. You look at it as a circle, bisected by a line. You look at it as the number that it is in the alphabet. You look at it as the sound. And you might look at it as words that begin with Q. Quotient, queen, quack, things like that, right? So now you've drawn a duck with a crown. And that is the quacking queen, who is adding up numbers to produce a quotient, right? Now, that is a rearrangement, but that's a quick example off the top of my head. So, if you want to come up with other variations, then yeah, you can add things, you can overlay systems and things like that. You can also subtract, as I've talked about before. You got to be careful with the subtraction, because I've mentioned that, and talked to people about it, and they come away with it, and then they report back to me that they subtracted some stuff, from their lives, when in fact they didn't. They added. They think they subtracted, but they added. Life became more complicated and less functional. So anyway, as far as what any of us should do is, well, I basically think that the broader the perspective is best, and just anticipate that someday you may graduate from the 3rd grade. You may move up a grade. you might skip a grade, you know. But just something to think about. It's like, what's involved in that, you know? I think people are here to learn, not to just be rigid and inflexible, you know, to get involved with philosophies and ideologies that never change. Perhaps serve you psychologically, but in the long run are no different from anything that came before. Okay? Bye-bye.